one. Recording is in progress and we will begin our meeting for tonight. First on the agenda is our auditor, but just before hearing from her, council member and colleague Jeff Lander has something to say.
Thank you. I'm going to make this very brief. It is in the holiday season and spirit, so I just wanted to offer these to our fellow council
Do we have
members.
to wear them?
No one has to wear them.
Okay.
I'm going to wear mine,
Okay.
and one is for Andrew, so we'll leave that
Andrew.
there.
Are these
Andrew
under
is
$20 in
And
value?
I just want to say, as our esteemed chair, you have a special one that has a nose that
Oh,
lights
has
up.
a nose. Okay, well, maybe we'll have to go on it.
Just adding to that, anyone who would like, there's some chocolate that we can pass around, some chocolate
The nod.
or whatever you want to call
Okay,
it. Yes.
that's it?
Well,
Or you have
I would
something else?
say that in the comfort of our own home and practicing with Rosie, it seemed like a good idea. We had composed a song in the tune of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but I have a feeling that probably went over better in our home than it would here. So we will send that around in text.
Okay.
Many things often turn out to be better.
Better, we hope.
And especially with your
Trial.
11-year-old daughter singing with you. So,
Yeah, okay.
okay.
Okay, well, thank you and season's greetings to everybody. And Eva, you are on with our excellent auditor's report.
I'm so excited, and I wish I were there to get the ears, the reindeer. I know. I
Yeah.
wish there was a way to electronically put them on me.
They look
Um,
And
So
actually-
I'm gonna go ahead and, oh gosh, Michael, it says the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Can you
Yeah, hang on a second.
check? I know this is the audit report is everyone's favorite meeting, right? I'll
Well,
try
it
and
shows
keep-
we're straight and honest. Actually,
You're-
I've tried to figure out how to be something other than straight and honest, and I can't figure it out.
No,
you're good.
that's good. That's really good. All right. Looks like it's working now. So
Okay.
can everyone see audit report here?
Yes.
So just as a reminder, I'm presenting the audit report this evening for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. And the prior year information is included in there just for your sort of edification and just so you can make comparisons. But the focus tonight on the presentation will just be on the 23 results. So I do always pause on the independent auditor report because this is essentially what the village pays us to do as the auditors, is express an opinion on your financial statements. So you'll see in the second paragraph, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. So essentially what that means is that you have a clean, unmodified audit opinion. And sometimes those words don't sound good, but that's the best audit opinion that you can get. So congratulations on that. I do like to remind everybody that management is responsible for these financial statements, not us. All we do is provide the opinion on those financial statements. And just as a reminder, this is a meeting that has happened after the fact. So these financial statements were submitted to the state of Maryland by the October 31st filing deadline. So you guys are current with all of your state requirements. I'm going to skip over the management's discussion and analysis because essentially it's a summary of what I'm going to talk about in the actual statements themselves. So we're going to go ahead to exhibit A1. And this is the statement of financial position. And we're going to focus on this first column that says 2023. So essentially what this statement does is it shows all of the financial assets of the town, and it shows all of the liabilities of the town. And the difference between the assets and the liabilities are what's known as your net position, or your reserves. A lot of people like to call that reserves. So just to give you a very high level overview, the village has assets 6.5 million as of June 30. And if you look up here at the top, almost $5.4 million of those $6.5 million of assets are cash and investments. So you're very liquid. You have a lot of spendable dollars in the bank. You also have a very large amount, your capital assets of about 960,000. So your liabilities are normal, right? All organizations have liabilities at any point in time. Bills that haven't been paid, those are accounts payable. You also have, your lease liability. We implemented that standard last year, so your future payments on your office lease are included on the statement. Your total liabilities, which include your current and your long-term portion, about 353,000. We also know we have a big chunk of money, right? The ARPA funds that have not been spent are sitting in this line called deferred inflows. So until we expend those funds, we can't recognize that as revenue. So it sits here as a liability. So the difference between our assets and our liabilities and those deferred inflows is our net position. And the village has a very healthy net position of almost $5.2 million at the end of June. So that's really great. The next statement is the statement of program activities. And you kind of have to think of this statement like an income statement if you're used to the for-profit world. What it does is it shows all of our expenses by the categories that we use in municipal government, right? So how much it costs to fund general operations, building and zoning, public works, public safety, recreation, all of those things are here on the left. And then the columns over here, how did we pay for those expenditures, right? What did we do? We charged for services. So we generated some fees from that, about 49,000. We also have some operating grant contributions, about 42,000. So you see we have a shortfall, right? And so what covers that shortfall is our income taxes, our property taxes, and some very nice interest numbers last year. I'm sure you guys have talked about this. You generated 164,000 in interest income last year on your investments, which is a nice chunk of change. So our total general revenues were a little over 1.4 million last year. So overall, you had net income or a change in position of $667,000 last year. So that's how, when we add that number to the beginning of the year net position, that's how we end the year with almost 5.2 million in reserves. So like I said, a very good year for the village.
Yeah, Eva, remember 10 years ago, our interest was about $12 for the year?
Oh yeah, and we were really excited about it back then, right?
That's right.
It's nice that money is earning some money for you now, right? It really is nice that interest rates have sort of caught up. So there are two other statements in here, Exhibit A4 and A5, and you'll notice that these are what's known as the fund level financial statements. These are more what you're used to looking at when you look at internal financial statements. What these reflect are the resources that are currently available. So what they don't include are anything long-term in nature. So capital assets aren't included on here, neither is any sort of debt, right? So it really is just kind of how you budget the current year, what's available right now. I'm sorry, it came to vacuum. Let me shut that door. Hold on one second.
But you're fading out.
There was a,
She went to go.
there's a-
Sorry, I'm right back. Yeah, I had to shut the door. The cleaning crew came to vacuum.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So we have on the balance sheet here, we have 5.5 million in assets. And again, if you look up a couple rows, mostly investments in cash, very liquid. We still have some liabilities and we still have those deferred inflows, that ARPA money that we have yet to spend. So the difference between those is our fund balance, and this number is about 4.4 million. So like I said, very good, healthy balances. Your fund level financial statements are very similar. Our total revenues are 1.5 million. And as you guys are well aware of, most of your revenue is coming from income taxes. It was $1,149,000 last year. You also have expenditures on the fund level, about 866,000. So your change in revenues over expenditures last year, about 635,000. There are just a few notes that I wanted to go over with you, a couple that are of significance. I think you guys are all very well aware. I'm going to go to page 8 of the notes if you're looking at Exhibit A7, page 8. Most of your, sorry, not most, all of your investments are currently with the MLGIP, which is the Maryland Local Government Investment Pool. And so I just wanted to point that out. You also do have on page 13 of Exhibit A7, scroll real fast here, there we go. You do have some long-term liabilities, and I do just like to remind everybody that you do have future payments that you have already committed to. The first is your office lease. Your ending balance on that for the future commitments current lease term are $75,000. And then just as a reminder, the WIN liability, we're making those payments over time. It's not really a payment, it's a reduction of our income taxes that we receive. So that is $170,000 that we still owe the state of Maryland on that. On the very next page, page 14, I'd just like to remind everybody right here in the middle, we do have some balances that we have assigned or earmarked for future projects, the streets, the walkability, some other capital projects, and then we have that $1 million reserve. So our assigned fund balance of $2.5 million, just as a reminder, this is what it represents. The last one I wanted to talk about is on page 16, note 6. I know that I'm already tired of talking about the ARPA funds. You guys are probably tired of talking about the ARPA funds as well. I feel like that's all we've talked about for a couple of years now. You guys still have $961,000 to spend. So hopefully you have a plan for that, because it does need to be incurred or encumbered by December 31st, 2024, which is sneaking up on us very quickly. And the one thing I will caution, and I haven't talked to anybody there, I think we have plans to chat in January, but we will have to do a different audit if we click over and spend more than $750,000 in any particular year. So just keep that in mind. But that separate engagement can be paid for with actual funds themselves. But it will require some additional testing. So I do like to warn people. Hopefully you can spend that $961,000 in 2 different fiscal years and we don't have to worry about it. The last couple pages of the exhibit B1 here, these are the most important pages. These are the budget versus actual. So this is what you guys see on a monthly basis, right? You're looking at your monthly approved budget versus actual expenditures. Just a couple lines I want to point out. And Arthur, I think you guys take budgeting the very most conservative approach. I think you are one of my more conservative municipalities. And this is why your income tax line was $700,000 for the budget. Your actual was $1.1 million. So you were $449,000 to the good last year. I wouldn't change a thing, honestly, because income tax, 2 people could affect that number, right? So you have a bad year and that number could go down. But I will tell you, it really does help your budget versus actual variances to have one that's that much to the good. If you look at the rest of them, they're pretty in line. Only other one that sort of jumps out was that interest line, because no one was expecting interest rates to increase at the pace that they increased. And so, next year you may want to, or fiscal year 24, hopefully you bump that number up some. So you'll see here, for total revenues budgeted 850,000, you received 1.5 million. So you were to the good 649,000 on a budget versus actual basis. So on the expense side, same thing. If you look through, you guys did a really good job budgeting. I mean, really good. And you can tell that through all of the different categories. The designated funds are the ones where sort of if the project comes to fruition, you have it budgeted, but a lot of times, you know, the projects haven't gotten started yet. So you'll see that one is a little off from the budget. Everything else is right on par. And so that last expenditures line, your final budget had 3.3, almost 3.3 million. Actual was 866. But most of that was the 0.5 million of designated funds. So again, you know, right on par with what you were budgeting. That is everything.
Okay. Well, thank you. I like those numbers. I'm not sure what you're saying in your other clients, but our first November receipts from the income tax were less than we received last year. I think that last year or the year before we hit the peak, so this year is going to be a little bit less. So we'll be trending down to more normal. Do we have any questions from any council members?
You should still be okay though, right, Arthur? Because I'm guessing you still budgeted very conservatively for income taxes. So yeah.
Yeah.
I have some comments, but I think Andrew, Andrew, did you have some? Oh, okay, sorry. Just a couple comments. I mean, first, it's a team, and I think all recognition has to obviously go to Arthur and others who have been heavily involved. You know, our past chairs, Susan, Andrew, but just in general, the fiscal health of VMA is something, quite frankly, as we can appreciate, is envied by many. And so, you know, we're in one of those good positions to kind of take a look at this and understand it. And then we know that we have had some, you know, residents and others that have talked about. So for example, the numbers that stick out, and again, in a very good, healthy way, are when you look at things like, you know, current assets of 1.5 million or net positions of 5.1 million. And then we have reserves where we've sort of itemized those about 2.5 million. And then you've got this ARPA fund that's sitting out there that is also another million. So I think that's one thing, just putting out there in full transparency, Eva and the council, is we're going to have a meeting after the new year to talk a little bit about this, understand some of the metrics that other nearby jurisdictions and municipalities use in terms of their reserves, and understanding where we are and then what that delta is. And then, you know, we'll, like I said, we're in a very enviable position, but we also know that we have some significant capital improvement projects. So, you know, and also the last comment I'll make on it, as Arthur and others can share, is there have been some very lean years where we very clear that, you know, this is a snapshot, but we have to look at the time series and recognize there are years that are austere. And like you said, there are a couple perhaps households that drive that up. But then, you know, we were on a call earlier, Michael and I, with Andrew Friedson, who is now the president of the county council. And it shared that, in fact, I think it was tonight or tomorrow, the economic council of the county is convening. And, you know, they are predicting that there will be a downturn. I know we've been somewhat immune, but everyone is looking that there may be a downturn expected in the next few years. So with that said, I just want to put that out there. All good, and looking forward to that discussion around the ARPA and our reserves.
Good,
Thanks.
Are there any resident questions, particularly on this subject? Anyone raising their hand? Okay, well, thank you, Eva. Another clean report, and we'll look forward to see you next year.
Yeah,
Thank you.
guys. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Good, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, weather report, please.
Okay. Weather report is rather interesting. I don't think anybody was up around 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning where to see the snow. The snow was coming down heavier than I've seen it since 2016. And there was some slushy accumulation on the streets. There was up to almost an inch of snow on grassy areas and elevated surfaces. Now, we may actually see that again late Monday night and Tuesday. But before that, we're gonna get rain and lots of it again like we did last weekend, and wind.
When, what day?
That would start Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, Monday into Monday night. And then we could very easily get another changeover to snow before it's all said and done early on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that.
Okay.
But as far as the long range is concerned, I don't really see any white Christmas here or many other places in the country. As we will be under a very mild weather regime, probably going into January. It could change kind of dramatically after that. So stay tuned.
Watch out for El Nino, right?
That's what it's all about. That's
I'll
absolutely what it's all about.
I'll comment on that. We have our snow crews and our tree services ready to go for emergency services. So if you know of anything or anything happens, please email and call me, especially on the weekends.
Yeah.
I will be checking that when weather's bad.
Well, I'm gonna give Michael a heads up, days in advance, in anticipation of anything
Okay,
looming on the horizon.
good, thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thanks, Kate. Okay, anyone out, residents, anyone else with questions, comments, views of the world, news of the world? Anyone?
Doug and
Doug
her.
in Highland.
So who is it?
Doug in Highland.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Doug, Roman?
Thank you. And thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to follow up on one question that came up at the last meeting. At the last meeting, the council acknowledged that the building administrator had made an error in approving plans at 3419 that exceeded the lot size limitations in the village code. And as I shared, the building administrator earlier in the year had indicated to us that he was not aware that the village code's lot size limitations were different from the county codes. And of course, they're more restrictive. The village is more restrictive, suggesting that he had been reviewing and signing off on plans based on the county code and not the village code. Given that the village and the village council the village is responsible for accountability of persons in the village's employ, and that the council is responsible for oversight of that accountability, could you share with us the steps that the village either has taken or plans to take to ensure accountability, at least with regard to the specific error that the council acknowledged in the last meeting?
Well, we are not aware of any other situation like that. It's never come to our attention. No one brought it to our attention. So we are unaware of any other incident similar to the one you mentioned.
And that building was required to be changed because it was the covered porches definition. That was the question, and that front porch was changed to accommodate the more restrictive village's building lot coverage.
Right. I'm not referring to the compliance of the developer. I'm referring specifically to, we have the building administrator made an error, and so and was in the village's employ, and compensated for his work, which was an error. And I'm just asking in terms of steps taken to ensure the accountability of the building administrator in this case.
That would be a personnel issue that is not generally publicly discussed. So any other one, anybody else out there?
Larry Wasson.
Larry,
I would just say one quick thing, and I think it is, and Doug Naomi, again, thank you for the comments. And one thing just administratively, I know that we have talked about is how do we perhaps look at this as a process perspective? And are there ways that we could perhaps interject some sort of part of this, or as this is under review, that there is an extra pair of eyes or some other accountability piece? I don't think we've quite figured out what that could be or how that may happen, but I know that we have discussed it. And as Arthur said, there are some things here that are personnel that typically are done, you know, because of sensitivities we do in closed meetings. So I think that we can't really comment on that.
okay, so Larry Watson,
Yes.
Larry, you there?
I don't quite understand that. That sounds like, well, I'm trying not to get mad anymore, so I'll be calm. It's just plain gibberish.
It,
The fact of the matter is that when a situation like this happens, you as a group have a responsibility. And this villager who's called up and asked you pointed out that the stuff is being done wrong by the people that you're paying. What are you doing about it to solve it? To give him a non-answer like that is inexcusable. There are all kinds of things that you should be doing. Number one, if it was done wrong, what if you'd put in place to stop it from being done wrong in the future? You said nothing to him about that. You just left him with emptiness. That's number one. You've made a statement that this has never happened before. That's not true. In a previous meeting, I informed you that Tom Plotz pointed out that the village inspector was not taking care of the house on where Taylor and Delfield Street meet. And that's an acknowledged fact. It's in our records. So it's happened more than once. And it's been ongoing. And to say, to just leave it in an abyss with $5 million to bring people in to straighten this out, I'm sorry, it's inexcusable.
Larry, I will reply to that directly. First, the garage problem was not a mistake. It was an ambiguity in the code that was later corrected by changing the ordinance. Reading the code, it was not a mistake. It was a corner lot and there were issues about what is a front-facing garage. It was ambiguous and it was corrected. On the issue of the covered porch, it almost automatically corrects itself. You become aware of it and you don't do it again. And I didn't say there wasn't, we are unaware of any other time that has occurred. It may have never been brought to our attention. It was never called up.
So you're, if I understand you, you're saying that it is self-correcting? How is that?
You didn't know it, now you know it. It's
No,
self-correcting.
excuse me. I didn't ask you to tell me that. You just told me. I asked you, how do you know that it's self-correcting?
Because it is now understood what the code is.
Ron Bolt has his hand up.
Ron Bolt?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I believe Michael explained at the last meeting that he's working on a permit application checklist to force all of us to take a look at the specific requirements of the code and see that they're checked off, and that checklist will become part of the council package going forward.
Good, thank you.
So then, if I understand things,
Was what,
and I'm talking to Doug here. Doug, Ron Volt answered your question. Okay.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? John, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't have a question. Thank you. I was just
Okay.
exclaiming that what was covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay,
Doesn't look like it.
if there are no more questions, let's move on. I wanted to move forward the discussions of committees, so committee members and chairs who have some things to say can say their pieces and be done. don't have to hang around all night waiting for everything out.
Keith Allen with the Community Engagement Committee. We're gonna be holding a meeting next month, next year in January. Concerning our La Firm event, which is gonna be very nice, which will take place in March. So that's what we're gonna be discussing there.
Can you speak up, please?
Where's the mic?
The mic is right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, we're going to be talking next month at our Community Engagement Committee meeting concerning the La Firm restaurant event that will take place in March, which is going to be very, very nice. We want everybody in the community to join in on. And may I take this opportunity from me and from Riley, David, and Andrew, and of course, Gracie, to wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
thank you, Kate. Do we have, is
It looks
other,
like
is
Naomi's,
is Naomi here?
Mhm.
I think. that's
Yes,
Naomi.
I'm here.
Thank you.
So I have two things. One is, I want to ask, did the Community Engagement Committee go ahead with its December winter event?
The candle,
No,
no,
The illumination?
the illumination, I currently.
There's
don't.
no plan at this time.
No plan.
Okay, that's too bad. Okay, so may I give the report on the task force and on anti-Semitism awareness and education? That's a long name. So we are coasting along. We are now planning for a January 16th, 7 p.m. event. It's a workshop, a webinar, online, with a capacity for up to 1,000 people, with being being offered by American Jewish Community, the local chapter, with 2 professional trainers to help us understand anti-Semitism and contend with it within ourselves, with our family, with our neighbors. So that's my announcement. We're about to send out a flyer. If not, certainly maybe not tomorrow, but Monday, to not just VMA residents, but also adjoining municipalities, some of which have already expressed an interest, some of which signed on to the county's resolution on anti-Semitism, but hadn't gotten around to doing anything. And when they learned what we're doing, they jumped on it. And I'm hoping they will deliver participants. It's an odd time of year, it's holidays, etc., but we'll send out a flyer starting next week. And I hope you will send it far and wide, not just to your Jewish neighbors, but obviously to non-Jewish neighbors. And the only, sorry, go ahead, Arthur.
I was just say, listening to the people from the AGJC, I think this is going to be a very good event. I encourage everyone to sign up to it. They seem to be highly competent, very interesting.
Thank you. I appreciate your vote of confidence. And we have asked them what they would charge us for this event. And they usually command somewhere between 1,000 and, I can't remember, she said 50,000. They give their workshops to thousands of people, including law firms all over the country, including organizations all over the country. So we've encouraged them to submit a bill to us, which Arthur is helping us navigate through. And I would understand completely if it's not paid until after the event takes place next year.
Thank you.
That's my report. Any questions?
Are the water people here? Anyone?
Phil Hurst is here.
Phil, if you're there, do you want to say something about the water committee and the grant application? Is he?
Gene's here.
Yeah, I was trying to come off mute. Thanks, Arthur. Yeah, very quickly, the water committee made quite a bit of progress in the last 10 days. Some of the folks here who helped certainly know, but for the rest of you, yesterday we filed a grant application with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. The grant application is really for funds to conduct a diagnostic assessment of our stormwater system, and to hire an engineering firm to come in and do that assessment. The DNR administers both federal and state funds and disperses them to municipalities under a series of different solicitations. The solicitation that we applied for is all about understanding and enhancing municipalities' capacity to plan and help them reduce flood risks that are associated with climate change. And so we really felt like we had a strong application, including after conversations with the folks at the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. So with a lot of hard work from the water committee members, in just a few short days, we were able to assemble what I think is a pretty strong grant application with letters of support from state legislatures, the village council here, and Congressman Raskin. So long story short, the grant would be for $80,000 to hire that civil engineering firm to do the assessment. Officially, I think parties are notified in early April, but the DNR told us that frequently they're able to give informal notification well in advance of that date.
Well, I also want to say that Phil did a huge amount of work to get this out in a little over a week to pull everything together. So thank you, and thank your committee. What anyone else other than elections around?
I think that's it.
That's it.
No one-
Any other committees? I guess that's about it right now. Okay, let us move
Well, there's a-
back.
Election.
We will hear from the election when we consider the election plan.
Oh, okay. I
Okay.
thought they had a report for a general report as well as.
Well, let's pull it
Okay.
all together.
Okay.
Marty, we can wait until we talk about elections all together.
At your service, Arthur, no problem.
Okay. So next is the
Minutes.
Michael, right?
The approved
We have to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
page 48 of your packet.
Okay. We have a
With
motion to
two
approve the
attachments.
minutes of the last meeting. I have reviewed them. I will move to approve. I've read them. You will second? Any? Aye. Okay, we have approved the minutes.
Andrew, how did you vote? If you're there.
I as well, I apologize.
Aye for Andrew, good. Okay, Michael, manager's report.
Okay, we're moving quick. I appreciate that. My report is on page 65 of your packet, a big packet today. So sorry about that. But moving right in, the village is mostly open for all of December through the holidays. So I just want to make everyone aware of that. We're only closed for one day, which is December 25th. And then we will probably close early the 2 last Fridays before the holidays as well, to allow us to get a early start on the weekends, but otherwise we will be here. And a reminder that I take my annual vacation in January to get away from the cold. So I'm planning ahead to make sure that all the work's covered, and Aaron's been great covering for me when I need to be out. So we'll be okay. We are finalizing the contract with Compost Crew. We signed that today. That is going to launch on January 1st. Everyone that composts with Compost Crew currently in the village will no longer be receiving a bill. You will still have your own account. If you miss a pickup or need something, you can still reach out directly to them, but we will be paying for it at the village level. And if you want to sign up, there will be a way to sign up for composting services where you still enter all your information, create your account. You actually do add your credit card still, but you won't be charged anything. We will pay for it. I'm meeting with them tomorrow again to finalize a launch of and making this announcement to the entire village, and also encouraging additional people to sign up. Composting is great. It reduces the amount that goes into our landfill, and it's each of us doing our part. So we really want everyone to compost, and this council was good enough to pay for it. So I'm sure a lot more people will want to take advantage of that.
Michael, will there be any sort of educational outreach by composting?
That's kind of what I'm asking them on the call tomorrow, is if they have any material that I can distribute or any training type stuff. So we'll see. I'm sure they do. And you know, I've been to their farm and seen their operation, and I can attest for it's pretty impressive, the amount that they're avoiding going into landfills. So yeah.
On that, if you sign up, you can go to their farm, take a trash can along, and you can get more than the bag or two that they give you as being a member. I had a better garden this past year than I ever had after 2 trips to the farm. Right?
Love that.
To see.
We've already had a snow this year, as Keith mentioned. So we are aware of that. Snow plows are ready to go. The sand buckets are there. So if you need it, if you think the roads are slick on the hills, go ahead and spread some sand there for you. No problem. We've also put out a call for people that need, for whatever reason, need their public sidewalk shoveled. The council passed not a big budget. We can't do it for everybody. So please, only if you absolutely need it. And we've already had people.
Someone has something to say.
Someone's really wants their sidewalk shoveled. So that's a great service, and we already have people signing up for that. So I am worried that a lot of people are going to sign up and then we're going to go broke, but it's okay. We have $5 million, so we'll be okay.
Jeff, this is equal opportunity. You got to hear it.
And I will volunteer for this.
Okay, so leaf vacuuming has been ongoing. I know there was 3 weeks between the last 2 visits by Rolling Acres to do leaf vacuuming. There's a lot of calls, but they were doing a really good job and going slow. They made sure to clean every storm drain and took the entire week to clean the village. And they are returning again next week, probably for the last cleaning of the year. But I think I want to get one more in the spring as well, because I think there's a lot of pollen that comes down. We might need to bump up that budget to accommodate that, but I do think there's a need there. So we can talk about that in the spring. We have plenty of leaf bags. Even though I ordered, I'll show everyone on the camera, my stacks of leaf bags back there.
On top of the cabinet there.
I ordered half the amount of leaf bags we ordered last year, and I've distributed them to over 100 households in the village, and I still have that many left. So this says we should not give leaf bags to every single household. We should wait for people to order them, because apparently a lot of people were throwing those away, or they're sitting in their garage from past years. So I think we were giving out too many. So, and I've been collecting the data about who uses leaf bags, how many people want. And I have all of this data, so next year I can even fine tune it even more. And that's saving a lot of money, and we'll probably be adjusting our budget as a result of that. So
If residents have already picked up leaf bags, can they get more, or?
you can come by and get leaf bags. I'm not gonna keep distributing these forever. And once they're gone, they're gone, but come one, come all, we have plenty.
First come, first served.
Yeah, exactly.
Can council members take extra leaf bags?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Council members are residents.
thank you. All right.
We have now signed up 5 people to Chevy Chase at Home for the village.
Good.
Was a set of, was a set of criteria ever developed for memberships?
Well, we had
talked about
we had
it,
talked
but-
about doing that, and we kind of just decided to do business as kind of a test run, first come, first serve. Chevy Chase at Home has requirements of who is allowed to join,
but
because
do
you have to be
know
a
how
senior
they
and stuff.
actually Find their criteria to our
No,
membership funds? We
Well,
don't,
They
right?
have just accepted everyone I've sent them.
Yeah, right.
So, and I haven't been billed for those people yet, but those people are active members now. So there's 5 people so far. We estimated the budget that you all passed was about 12 memberships. So we're totally still under that. And yeah, we can, and I think we want to continue this program in future years. We probably should look at,
I think the way it's defined now, as far as eligibility for membership, it wasn't just throw it out there and see who signs up. It was really for people who need
Who need it.
services and are otherwise unable to obtain them.
Susan, we can't hear you.
Okay, what I said was, I think that when we approved the designation of those funds, it was with an understanding that they were to be distributed for memberships to residents who were in need of Chevy Chase at Home services, but would otherwise be unable to afford them.
I would just like to jump in. I think at the time we had talked about that we would develop criteria. And then what had happened since then, because we've had even though there's been a really wonderful sort of marketing campaign, I see Gene has been on, but in general at various events, but the level of interest in terms of actually signing up was relatively low. What we did is we sort of opened it up as part of the pilot to really get an understanding. So that is my understanding. We talked about criteria, but I think at this point it's a pilot to assess. And then one other thing I just want to add, just putting in the back of the minds, there was a leadership discussion with, as I mentioned, Andrew Friedson, council member Andrew Friedson, who's now president, and talked about how this is a real important priority for the entire county council. And in fact, it looks like the county is about to pass some new legislation and possible some new resources. And so, Michael, if you wanted to add that as part of your management report, but I think there's a real opportunity because we've done the pilot, we mentioned it, there's interest, but there may be a county sort of transition where there may be resources there that can take over the program.
And adding to that, the county so far has relied on these so-called senior villages to provide the services. They don't do it themselves, so it is well accepted across the county that this is the way to do it.
And I'll add that Chevy Chase at Home told me there's already about 20 people that had signed up previously to Chevy Chase. So there was that many members in the village already. They won't tell me who those people are because of privacy issues, but so we've added 25% to our membership at Chevy Chase at Home. How to define need, and if we only pay for the people that really need it, people on fixed incomes or something, but yeah, I don't know how to do that. So I'm open to ideas, and maybe next year we can go one of 2 ways. We could define it really narrowly, or we could open it up and just pay for all 25 people that are signed up.
Or just an assertion that I need it.
And the residents who are receiving, have you received any feedback from them about what kind of needs they have, or
No.
as a gauge or something?
And I'm not sure I'm comfortable asking people what their
Right,
needs are,
I
but
just
yeah.
wondered if someone offered and said,
Yeah, I have had minimal conversations with
Yeah.
people about it. They've
Mhm.
just kind of given me their application, and I've handed that directly over to
Right.
Chevy Chase at Home.
Okay,
So-
next item.
Yeah, I do want to just share, and I think it's important, is think Susan raises important points. I mean, this is a pilot and we're going to assess it, and it's very possible that the folks, and again, I'm saying this without going into depth of who signed up, but if there is really no financial need, but this was more of a branding and folks really then got to know about the program and would have signed up without our resources, that's also informative. So, you know, when this is a pilot, it's not a perpetuity or an annuity, but it's really just trying to understand where we head.
Okay, so more to come on that pilot program. I have 3 engineering firms that are going to provide me estimates for what both the permitting to the state and the county and the actual design of the sidewalk down Brookville Road. Because that sidewalk is going to be 5 feet wide and that sidewalk is 1,600 feet long, that will be over the county's requirement for sediment control. So we will have to either apply for a waiver for it or figure out how to accommodate the sediment control requirements where you put, you know, fences and hay bales around the construction area. So that's another hurdle that we just realized we have to jump through. The design firms I've walked the sidewalks with them and they're all coming back with estimates. And this is going to be, you know, one very reputable engineering firm, you know, told me this is probably going to be a 6-month process to get all the permitting and everything done before we could actually break ground. So that's it's quite a process and we're moving forward with
And
it.
some of those are funds that we've set aside. A lot of those funds will be taken up in that construction.
Right, and that's actually our ARPA money, which we do need to allocate all of it by next budget. We allocated about 400,000 of it in this year's budget. Next year's budget, we'll need to allocate the rest of it.
Right.
So this project is all coming out of ARPA funds.
Well, when I had heard that the village of Chevy Chase, it took them 20 to 25 years to put in the sidewalks south of Martin's Additions, couldn't figure out why it took so long. Now I'm beginning to understand why. They also had the Historical Society to deal with, which we don't have to do. But there's just, it's complicated. Okay, moving on. Trees.
By my latest count, we planted 31 trees.
Private trees or?
Both,
village
both.
And private?
And if you have seen them or received one, you know, thank you very much for the people that requested them. You know, those trees are the canopy for the next 100 years in this village. And the trees look pretty impressive this year. They're pretty big. So we're happy, and we've worked out a couple kinks where, you know, one got planted in the wrong spot and things like that. But I think we're good. And next year I'm going to have even an earlier deadline. So you can start sending me your tree requests right now. I'm already making a list for next year. So
I want to emphasize, these are trees for private property. And so far, since we started this program, we've planted more than 100, which is a small forest. So keep it up. Get a tree, think of the next generation.
There we go.
And I know personally we have done it, and just extraordinary program. We love it. So
Great. We'll keep doing it. The holiday fund is now live. It'll be live for another week because we want to make sure that waste management crew members get their checks by the end of the year. There is a lockbox here in the village office. You can come in during business hours and drop off your checks. Please do so. I really want to break that that record that was set last year of about, I think it was $9,000, which is what our budget is. So let's blow that budget out. You know, those crew members work so hard and they have had quite a year in the village, including several, you know, accidents and health issues. So I really do think this is a really lovely program, and I appreciate everyone that's coming by and saying nice words to them. That's really great. I did try to get an online sign-up system so people can make those payments electronically or with their credit card through Zelle or something like that. Because our checking account through Truist Bank is a public fund account, they do not accept or work with Zelle, apparently. So that was quite the process it took me to realize that. The bank didn't even know that. So that took a while, and then they sent me down this lane of trying to set up an online storefront where we could create different codes where people could buy things with their credit cards. But of course that costs us a lot of money, and then there's fees on credit cards. So checks is all we receive at this point until we figure out an alternative to that. You can go through a third-party system like Venmo or PayPal, but that raises all sorts of other concerns. So for now, we're just taking checks. I'm sorry that didn't work out. For buildings, the council approved a variance request for 3412 Taylor. We're expediting the process of, that's the house with the sandbags, by the way. We're expediting the process of approving those permits now, and I'm hoping to have those permits issued tomorrow or Monday. So thank you very much. I'm glad to have that one on its way to being resolved. We have asked the county to inspect the bioretention planter boxes at 3417 and 3419 Cummings to make sure that they are now designed to those county standards, as you know, independent structures from the foundation of the house. 3415 Cummings has hired an engineering firm, Cass Engineering, and they have told us that they are going to demo that house and build a new house there. So that's coming down the pike. The person that bought that house is a current resident of the village. So it's not a developer who's trying to flip it or something, but that's a very large lot. So we'll see what their plans say. We are preparing to close permits out for several properties, including 3500 Raymond, 3409 Thornapple is almost done, 3508 Bradley, and 151 Quincy. Those are all very close to being closed out. So that concludes my report.
Good, thank you. Any questions, discussion? Okay, well, thank you, Michael. A busy week, busy month.
Indeed.
Okay, moving on then. Marty, the election report.
Thank
And
you, and appreciate.
coming year.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a quick question for Michael. This Truist Bank, is it possible for BMA to switch banks? I've heard not good things about Truist Bank.
It is
It's
possible.
something
It would be
under consideration.
it would be quite a process, but yes, it is possible.
I'll leave that in your hands. Good luck on the election stuff. I want to start with some thank yous. First, I'd like to thank Andrew and the entire council last year for going through the election regs so carefully, so they gave this year's committee such a good solid base to work with. It's really been quite a project. I mean, taking 5 different documents from last year to consolidate them into one, but we have good procedures. We didn't have to recreate things from scratch or reinvent the wheel. So thank you to everybody on last year's council who gave us the basis. I'd also like to thank Arthur and Katie for your helpful suggestions and information, and Michael, you too. Really wonderful to have your input on the process. Especially like to thank you, Ron. Ron, are you still on here? Because Ron twice responded to committee requests for a legal review of the drafts as we were working through them, and that was immensely helpful. And I have to thank also the residents. You know, people in this village do seem to care about elections, and we put a lot of drafts. You know, as for every meeting, we had a packet with drafts and red lines and whatever, and we got a good amount of really solid, helpful input from community residents, and it's just been great. It's been such a group project, and makes me proud to live here. So there's another thank you I have to do too from the committee to the council, which was thank you for approving the RFP last month to help us get hopefully a contractor to do some part-time work to help us update the voter roll this year, which is quite a big project, as you know. And it turned out, Michael told us that the Maryland Municipal League's RFP announcement message board doesn't work. So he's been sending that RFP out to his contacts. And the committee also contacted the County Board of Elections and the League of Women Voters for Montgomery County and the Maryland Common Cause team, all of which do a lot of election work. And they all agreed to distribute the RFP through their networks too. So I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to get it out there, despite the fact we can't post it on the Municipal League. So hopefully we'll have some responses. December 20th is when we'll know. And I'm excited to see that we might get some. So yay team, keep your fingers crossed that we get some good folks proposing on that. Now to the meat and potatoes, the election ordinance, the election schedule. And of course you all saw that we sent you, council members and Michael, the public explanation. The committee has voted unanimously that we really, really encourage the council to make this an ordinance to stabilize the election process. And one of the benefits of having an ordinance is that you have to have a public process to change it. It can't just be changed overnight by a resolution. And that public process requires whoever wants to make the change to justify the change. I think that's a really important safeguard for the village, that this won't be changed. I don't want to say arbitrarily, but the people will have to substantiate if they want to change these rules. The rules that are incorporated in this document basically are very similar to the ones in 2022 and almost identical to what we had in 2023. And so the council has now voted for them twice, and they've worked well both years. It is really, I think, time to stabilize the whole process and not have to go through what we've gone through the last few years. Incredibly time consuming. And this is the kind of thing that is so bedrock. It shouldn't be, something that we have to spend a whole lot of time on. Our vision from the committee is that next year there'll be an ordinance, the procedures are there, they're good, we know they work. And all committees will have to do from now on is just give you that one-page schedule for the election. You saw we did that this year. We sort of modeled the process. You get a one-page, you ask the council to approve the schedule for the election, answer any questions the council has about the process, and just do the procedures in the ordinance. So you don't have to go through this every year. We really hope that you will take that very seriously, because it's been a real time sink for a lot of people on the council and of course on the committee and the residents as well. So this is about building for the future and stabilizing, and we've got a good base here. I could not be prouder of everybody who contributed to this document. Happy to answer any questions. The committee this evening has got a request, as you saw in our committee report. Our request is that you approve the schedule for the 24 election. That's the one pager we gave you with the dates on it, and vote to introduce the ordinance. It is also, I want to say, we're kind of excited about the process here, because if you introduce this as an ordinance or even as a resolution, we have 30 days here for residents to look at it even more and give us more comments. And I want to say one resident came in today with a good suggestion. She said in the voter roll section, we should say that the voter roll is a public document and that voters can look at it by request, which of course is true. That's state law. Any voter in Martin's Additions can see the voter roll. And so, I don't think the committee will have any trouble adding that, because we're all about transparency. And any other suggestions from residents, I'm looking forward to, and from council members, obviously, to incorporate. I want you to say this has been a very open process, and we've been delighted because the open process has produced a better document. So that will continue, I think, and a plan for the committee is to welcome public comments for the next 2 weeks or so and give you, if anything, a markup with whatever we as a committee vote to think that we should include for you, and have you adopt it in January. We would be delighted to have you adopt it as an ordinance. With that, I will open it to any questions you may have.
Okay, well, thank you, Marty. I will start off and then ask my colleagues to provide their own comments and questions. Let me just start off by the first question you raised, of whether this should be an ordinance or a policy. I do not think it should be an ordinance for several reasons. First, it is a long document, 13 pages, more than 7,000 words, a lot of procedural detail. Changing an ordinance requires 30 days, at least 30 days from introduction to approval, and another 20 days before it takes effect. With more than 7,000 words of procedural detail, there are bound to be changes, small changes that have to be made. And I think we ought to be able to make them in less than 50 days and without going through the formal requirements of changing an ordinance. So that is my first suggestion. I would like to have that discussed immediately, decide that, and then go on to any of the other issues that we have before that anyone wants to bring up. I have a whole number of other ones, but I'll let my colleagues. So to begin with, I would like to move that this be considered a policy and not an ordinance. And I would like to have discussion of that.
Well,
Do you want
I
to
would
second that
yeah.
and just please discuss?
I agree that it is a very complicated, or not complicated, but it is quite lengthy.
And detail.
And detailed, and I will just say, I got as far as this second section until I realized there's a drastic misstatement on sort of a threshold matter, which is the size of the committee. It says the committee.
Susan, you have to speak up. You're hard to hear. I can't lip read you. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, I wouldn't want you to lip read me, so thank you for that, John. Okay, it says the committee, meaning the election committee, shall consist of no fewer than 5 qualified voter volunteers appointed by the council. That isn't consistent with the charter. And the fact that something so fundamental is wrong concerns me. And that is exactly why I think we should not undertake to enact this as an ordinance. It should be a policy. Obviously, we need time. Obviously, we need a lot of input. But I think we need to get it right above all.
Okay.
I think, and if I might also say, as far as it needing to be an ordinance so that we don't have all these changes every year. Marty, when you were chair in 2020, it was considered an evergreen policy. There were very, very minor changes, and primarily the dates were what the election committee worked on. There were some fine tuning, some tweaks, especially around the absentee voter process prior to the mail-in necessity. But it was fundamentally just setting the dates. And there's no reason it needs to be more complicated, and no reason that it needs to be codified.
Right. Thank
So
you.
I have a question. I have a question for Susan. What does the charter say about the size of committees?
Oh,
Okay,
3.
yeah, it says no fewer than 3. And here it says no fewer than 5.
Yeah.
So,
It says preferably 5, and we've needed 5 in the last few years. The council's heard that from the committees every year for the last 5 years, that you need at least 5 people.
But the
And
char-
again, saying 5 is not inconsistent with the charter saying a minimum of 3.
That's true. That's true.
but
But this statement should not be
that statement was wrong.
inconsistent with the charter and code.
This is what we're proposing going forward, that the charter can say a minimum of 3. That's just fine. We're not proposing a
Yeah.
charter change. We're saying for the ordinance or the policy, if you will, that the policy should be it's 5 people, because realistically, you all know, I think, that under the Open Meetings Act, a 3-person committee cannot communicate very well. No 2 people can talk to each other to do a project, because they have to have an open public meeting. If there's only 3 people on the committee, it's really not very
Yeah,
workable.
we understand that, Marty.
I know you do. So I'm saying that's another reason to have 5, besides the workload, which is substantial. We've really professionalized our elections. There is a real workload here.
I
So
would-
there's a good reason to have 5, 2 good reasons to
The
have 5.
committee advises that it shall consist of no fewer.
Or you could say the committee shall consist of no fewer than 3, and the committee prefers 5, but you can't, I would not
Okay.
recommend a conflict inherently.
On the question of ordinance policy, Katie, you have anything to say?
Well, I'm the liaison to this committee, and I've been in the trenches with them the last few, as like the journalist reporter. No, I'm not in the fight, but so I have things to say, but I'd rather let Jeff and
Jeff?
Andrew talk
Okay,
first.
Jeff.
Andrew, I'm happy to flip you for it.
Andrew?
You want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
If you don't mind going first, I'm just finishing up some little 2-legged creatures here for bed.
I totally appreciate that. So let me jump in. I'll try and make this pretty brief. But first, I just want to thank the committee. Obviously, there's an awful lot of work behind this. And I have to be frank, on the explicit question of ordinance or policy, I don't have that hard line as the other 2 council members who have stated that it shouldn't be an ordinance. I actually feel that there are some other jurisdictions that actually have adopted an ordinance that specifies more in detail about their election procedures. I think in the now and in the present, there's more of a question of, if this were to be an ordinance and we go through that process, there has to be an introduction. I mean, there's a process here of just, would it even be available in time for the election? Because clearly there are things that we need to look at this, that we may need to modify and change. So I would keep, this question on the table of ordinance versus policy. And really more importantly, is this shovel ready for this cycle? And then we can determine what is it that we need for this cycle that is realistic and achievable. And it sounds like, just in terms of the time frame, and I'm glad to hear from Ron on this if he has any advice, but it just seems, because we're already jumping into the election cycle after the new year, that trying to make this into an ordinance in time for this election may be a bit of a challenge, because there are some things that may need to be reviewed and tweaked, which we could do in a policy a bit more effectively. But I am all for the idea of ultimately having a more expanded ordinance on elections that goes into this level of detail. I just don't know if it's possible for this particular cycle.
Okay. Andrew, are you available?
Yes, I just shoved them into the bathroom and told them to brush their teeth. They're old enough. First of all, Marty, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. I know you shared this with me previously, just so I could take a look, and I'm sure others have had a chance to take a look. I've not had the bandwidth to take a deep dive into what you were presenting today yet. I'm a little torn here, concerned that there are fundamental language changes again. I mean, and maybe this is the only one that talks about shall be consisting of 5 members, and that could be tweaked, of course. After 2 pretty painful cycles in trying to tweak things and put things into a place where it could be a quasi evergreen document, I'm worried that so many changes have occurred again now that we have to go through that whole process again. I think if there's a way to present this, as we've now endeavored the last couple of years, as an evergreen type document that can just be reviewed every year with changes in the dates, as we discussed in previous years, that would be my preference. And I guess I would agree with Jeff as well, that turning this around so quickly, so close to the actual election would be challenging. So I'd have to take a closer look, Marty, and I apologize that I haven't had the chance to do that prior to today's meeting.
If I may speak, so I think, can everyone hear me all right? Everyone, am I clear?
Yes, Katie, thank you. And thank you, Andrew, too, and thank you, Jeff and Arthur.
All right, I don't have to lean over you, Susan, sorry. All right, I'll put it right between us. There you go. Okay, so as I expressed, I'm the liaison to the committee, so I'm the most familiar at this point in all the stages of this document. I'm definitely think there's some merit to making this document, this plan an ordinance, and I'll say why. I think Andrew just used a good word to describe the last few years of the election plan process as painful, and it has been painful. The opposite of that, this experience, I will say, as a liaison to this committee, they have started, I'm sorry, I'm a runner, so I'm gonna use this analogy. They're running a marathon, and they have started the race strong. I mean, as a body, they are gelling. They're congenial, it's positive, it's efficient. And this plan represents that. And I know the arguments are, it's complicated, the timeliness of it, but it's just like, I know that sound like we're fiscally conservative around here, but it's sort of the notion of you got to spend a little money to make some. So, I think it should be considered as an ordinance, and it has my support.
Okay. May I ask a technical question of Ron?
Yeah.
Yes,
Ron, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
So I just had a quick question, because there's this issue of policy versus ordinance. And my understanding is the committee needs this anyway, right? So whether it's an ordinance or a policy, they're expecting to use this as part of their modus operandi for this year. So I guess the question becomes, is there sort of a parallel where they can use this as a policy, and there could be possibly a vote on an I mean, because don't we have to go through an introduction and then we have to go through an adoption? So that
For an ordinance.
for an ordinance. So I mean, that could take, and then plus it sounds like there needs to be discussion, there has to be edits. So I don't, at least from my perspective, I'm not saying that isn't something we shouldn't do. But at the same time, we don't want to be caught in this quicksand of saying, what happens if at some point it's just not ready for that adoption and we have an election? Can they go in parallel and still use this as a policy?
Yes.
Well, it depends. So, I mean, there's basically three types of documents. There's an ordinance, a regulation, and a policy or procedure. So an ordinance is law. A regulation is an administrative procedure to execute the law. A policy or procedural document is more of something internal. So if this document was in the third category, yes, it could be used, even if it's not blessed by the council. However, it can't be in that third category if it contains any regulations, or if it contains any laws, or if it is inconsistent in any manner with the charter or code. And
So Ron,
I
if I could-
think that more time is probably needed, to be frank, because I was only given a couple days to review it, and I can't promise you that I caught everything. I didn't catch what Susan caught tonight, for example, and I had noted in my review that it would be great to see a red line, to see what changes were made from the current document. Because I spent a couple hours, but
let me respond to that if I could. for a
I'm
second,
not
Ron.
finished yet.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One thing I do want the council to be concerned about is if this is an ordinance, it becomes law. And I've highlighted a couple issues for you. They're policy issues for the council to consider, because there are some things in here that would change the current law. One of which is the proposal says there shall be no in-person voting. And I would, recommend against something like that. That was adopted in prior years for the current year because we were in COVID. But, there might be an election on the horizon where you want to go back to in-person voting, or a hybrid model where you have a box at the office, because some people still don't trust the mail. And, and it occurs to me too, like if you say there shall be no in-person voting, that means potentially you can't give someone a provisional ballot to vote on the spot, which,
That's correct.
And yeah, I hope that answers your question, Jeff.
Well, Ron, the difference between a regulation and procedure, could you go over that again?
And I see Andrew wants to.
Yeah. So the law may say, here's the law that the council adopts, and we hereby direct the ethics committee or election board to come up with rules to administer the law that we've written. So then the committee goes and writes the regulations to administer the law. So the law may say the elections board shall determine how far gosh, what's the term?
The no election zone. No election
How many
zones.
polling stations to use?
Right. How far from the table does the electioneering have to be? And
Exactly. Thank
all
you,
of
Marty.
those things.
Thank you, Marty. That was the word I was looking for.
I knew it
right?
was.
Electioneering. You read my mind.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what the difference is. Now the village charter provides either an ordinance or a regulation must be introduced and then held over for 30 days for public comment. But policies and procedural documents that are just administrative in nature and not regulatory in nature can be adopted on the spot.
So would you say this is procedural
No, I would say this contains regulation.
regulation?
And
So
I think the committee would agree with that, Ron. But Andrew, I think you had your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on what Jeff asked, because I had this very same question, and that is, what is our actual deadline for the council to approve the plan? I recall that we were under some kind of time pressure, of course, before,
Mhm.
which, and then, so then my question was exactly what Jeff asked. Can these two things happen in parallel? Let's say the ordinance doesn't go anywhere, but we still have to approve a plan before the election. So with that deadline in mind, I guess I would have some concern. And maybe it's only February, maybe it's only March, but probably more like February.
The election cycle does start in mid-February, Andrew. You're right about that.
Yeah.
And so we do need an approved document at the January meeting, so we don't have special meetings like we did that one year. Remember, you had to have a second special meeting, and that went on for hours. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to make this so clear and simple. Calling it a regulation and then considering it as an ordinance down the road, I think that would be workable. I can't speak for the entire committee because we wanted it to be an ordinance because we're tired of having it up in the air. We want to stabilize the election process. And we have good regs from last year, so thank you all for that. And contrary to an earlier statement, we essentially do not have a lot of new procedures in here. We have a lot of rearranged procedures. And Ron, that goes to your point about the red line. We actually have done red lines at each stage along this, as Katie can attest. But when you take 5 different documents, totaling like 20 some pages or whatever it was, and you consolidate them into one and then organize it in some reasonably logical fashion, what you end up is a sea of red. So we didn't give certainly it's possible. All you need to do is take last year's approved regs from January 19th last year and compare it with this document. They're both in Word docs. And what you'll see is a sea of red. It's not that the content changed. It's that things got added in from the other pieces where we consolidated, and the wording got clarified. We shortened a lot of it. We got a lot of duplication out of there. It's only 12.5 pages instead of 20, whatever. But it still looks all red. And I'm happy to provide that to you, but it's easy to do with Compare Docs. So that's available anytime you'd like it. And it's just not terribly helpful. I think that perhaps the way to proceed here is maybe as a regulation. I mean, the committee obviously needs, the plan of action here. And so I would like it introduced tonight, please, in whatever form you choose to introduce it. It is probably a regulation. I think that is an accurate statement. Go ahead.
Marty, question. Last year's plan, Marty, that seemed to get the approval of the community and the council. Why was that not feasible as for this election cycle? Was that not something that could just be like a carbon copy with change of dates? Wasn't that our goal last year? I feel like this is like Groundhog Day.
Yeah, no, we don't want it to be Groundhog Day. We started with last year's plan, exactly, the 2023 regs, exactly, all the procedures, and analyzed them, sort of like, okay, these work, mostly they do work. They were good, the election went well, didn't need much. But it was missing all these other pieces. There was nothing in it about the voter roll verification. The vote counting procedure was a separate document, which should be part of this because it's part of the same process. There was a lot of missing pieces that were scattered in these other 4 documents. And it made no sense in terms of a blueprint for a committee in the future, not just our committee, any committee, to follow, because it's like a recipe with, 4/5 of the ingredients missing. So we put it all together and we put it in an organized fashion. And it's really, I think, a very solid piece of work. I speak on behalf of the committee, not myself here, and all the people who contributed to it too, all the people who gave us input. Ron, again, thank you for your input. It was really an effort of love for VMA, and I don't say that facetiously, that we wanted to stabilize this process so that people have confidence in the election, so we don't have Groundhog Day. And the only way to do that was to make it all visible, to make it all clear and obvious. Here's the process, A, B, C. And so that's why we did that, Andrew. It wasn't because we didn't think last year's regs were good. We did. They're all in here. It's the procedures are the same, but they're in here with the other missing pieces now.
So what they did was consolidate the document and do some rearranging for logical purposes. But I would say, Marty, the parts that I have circled in red on my draft are all things that were added that were not in any of the 4 documents last year. So, but right now,
let me talk about that if I could, Arthur, just to respond, because I actually have a question for Ron on that exact point. One of the questions that the committee looked at very carefully is what's missing here? What's missing here? Do we, like, for example, we put in a piece that says the committee shall have comply with the Open Meetings Act, and that all election documents are public documents. That wasn't written anywhere last year, but that's pretty important. The question for you, Ron, that the committee and some residents had too, is if the village leaves out something here, is it in fact the case, is it correct that the state law just automatically applies? For example, some of the other villages, of course, we looked at what the other villages have. Some of them have this language about how felons can't vote. We as a committee did not think it was terribly essential to put that in here, because it doesn't seem to have been an issue in Martin's Additions anytime in my 40 years here. So Ron, the question is, if there was something omitted from our version, the VMA version of the election regs, does the state reg automatically apply or no?
It depends on the subject. The elections law article of the Maryland Code, most of those provisions apply only to elections at the state level and in Baltimore. There are a few provisions here and there that apply at the municipal level. But I mean, you don't need to restate the law to make it applicable in Martin's Additions.
That was our understanding. And one of the things we did add, Arthur, just to go ahead here, is we'd had a lot of questions from residents, not just this year, but previously, about how do you do a recount? How do you do a referendum? Do we even allow referendums? Well, the answer is, from our research, and I know this firsthand, is that yes, Martin's Additions has had referendum questions. That's how we adopted the charter back in '85, and has also had recounts. In 2019, the election committee itself did a recount because the election was so close. That was back when we were still doing manual ballot counting, and we turned the whole stack over and counted it a second time. We were there past midnight. It is the kind of basic election stuff that people do want to know. So we looked at the state regs and the county regs and got some advice from Ron on that, and did our own simple VMA version, simplest possible version of a recount reg, and the simplest possible version of a referendum, how you do a referendum question, and put it in here because we'd had community questions on both of those. So that's the kind of addition that is, where you have a committee that sits back and says, okay, we've got all these regs from last year, we've done them. What's missing? What do we need? What do people want? And that's where the resident input was important too, if that helps on the recounts and.
Okay, so let us start off. Is this an ordinance, or as Ron suggests, the alternative is a regulation? We've heard the arguments. I have moved that it not be an ordinance, that it be a regulation, as that seems to fit. We had a second on that, so it's time to move to a vote.
I just need to, I do apologize because I'm still a little bit, apologize if I'm a little bit slow here, but I just need to very tactically understand in terms of having a successful election for 2024, the difference between and the timing of the regulation versus the ordinance. Because my understanding, like, for example, if you wanted to have an ordinance in place by January, this would have to be formally introduced, give the 30-day ticker, and then there would have to be an adoption vote. So you're kind of forced. And if that
Ron, do we then adopt the ordinance as a regulation as we do an ordinance? I don't know. I haven't.
Yes. Yeah, the charter requires a 30-day layover for regulation.
Which we do have time for.
Boiled down, the only difference is an ordinance is law and gets codified. Really simplify it.
And the regulation does what? The regulation makes it a more formal document?
Well, the regulation.
Council policy, basically, but not law?
No, the regulation regulates conduct. So
but
the law might authorize.
Didn't the election plan regulate conduct as well?
It does. It does, Andrew. And I think that the 30-day requirement, again, for public comment makes the regulation more stable than just a resolution about a policy, which could be changed overnight. So that in that sense, a regulation is preferable to just a policy statement.
So I'm more comfortable with a regulation versus the ordinance right now to put this in,
and that would be workable. That would be workable.
And just to, I would like, regardless of which form, it sounds like it's available, but I think we've done this in past years, and I wanted to recognize Andrew's incredible work of bringing us through last year and the last couple of years of this and other, election chairs and committees. And this has been a very, raw topic, is if there is a red line versus a clean copy, that would be very helpful, just to see what new sections are there, what was added. Because again, there's no question about this being an incredibly thoughtful, designed document. Kudos to everyone. And in fact, I would like to see this become an ordinance at some point. But I think it's hard for me to make that calculus without seeing that very clear understanding of what was last year versus what is red line.
There were so many changes.
And I say that in all respect, like, I just want to see all the work that was put in so we can see what has been changed. But again, it gets down to that procedural tactical piece, which is, what do we have to do to make sure we have an election that goes on in 2024 and we don't get caught up in a semantic of, oh, we didn't give it enough time for this to be reviewed.
Ron, one last question before we vote. In the past, the election plans have been policies or resolutions. And that has not, that doesn't come up here as a possibility here. It's not on the list.
So, right, so, yeah, in prior years, the election plan has just been adopted. But I've advised the council that it must be treated as a regulation because it regulates conduct. So you apply the introduction and 30-day layover process required by the charter. But, the election plan isn't labeled regulation. Technically it is adopted by council motion or council resolution. It's an unwritten resolution, your motion.
I think I'm confused. So in the past, we've done it wrong?
No, in the past, you've done it correctly. So the election plan, it's titled plan, but it is in the nature of a regulation. So you apply the 2-day process to adopt it. Does that make sense?
Would it make sense to just call it a regulation this year? That'll clarify things, don't you think, Ron?
Regulation.
Well, I mean, the charter says we're going to have rules and procedures.
Okay.
So in the
But
past,
the charter
we've
also
referred
talks
to
about
it as the
regulations,
election rules and procedures.
Yeah.
The charter also talks about regulations, that the council shall pass rules and regulations. That's in one of the other sections. I'm sure you know our charter inside and out. So I have no problem calling it a regulation. I think that does give it more stability, which is our intent.
Let's proceed. All in favor of this being the VMA election regulation? Say aye.
And that gives us an opportunity to amend in the next 30 days or to go through and make adjuststants, correct?
Yes,
Vote
that's
aye.
correct. That's
So
correct.
this is a motion to introduce.
Motion to introduce. Okay. Aye.
As a regulation.
Oh, Andrew.
Okay.
Aye.
Good.
Jeff.
Aye.
3, 4.
It looks like the committee is also on
Okay.
board with regulation,
Good.
so
Yeah.
we're.
Okay, moving forward.
Thank you, Marty.
There are several areas in here that I have circled, but I want to let my colleagues go first.
Now we have introduced this
Yeah.
as a regulation, which means we have 30 days when we can have a public hearing and then we would adopt it. So if you want to go line by line, that would happen at the January meeting. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about that.
Could happen, could happen now.
It could happen right now.
You could
I
highlight,
may have made a mistake. Maybe
Right.
you weren't moving to introduce. Maybe you were just moving to settle the first question, which is, should it be an ordinance or regulation?
Yeah,
And at the end of your list, you can introduce as amended.
okay.
So
Good,
we'll
thank you.
have another vote. Okay, got it.
Good,
Thanks.
okay. Do we have any suggestions on changes, amendments? I have, shall I go?
Yeah,
You wanna
please
go?
go. I do have a question about that dropping non-resident landowner.
We
Okay,
can't hear
but I-
you, Susan.
I'll get
Okay,
to that.
Arthur apparently has it on his list,
Right.
so we'll just listen to Arthur
Okay.
because you can hear him apparently.
I'll come back to a few here. Recount. There is introduced here a procedure for recount that was
Arthur,
not in.
For the record, can you tell me where you are in the document? Like
Oh, I'm
what
sorry.
section can we start?
Item under 3 general provisions,
Okay,
item number 10.
okay.
says that the margin between winning and losing candidates is fewer than 10 votes. A losing candidate may request a recount. This sentence has been added from the past. It was not in previous documents, previous plans.
That's true because of community residents asked for that. What is the recount provision? And let
Well,
me just
you
say,
know,
this is the simplest one we could possibly come up with.
Okay, well, the direction was not to make substantive changes of this type. I would like to hear from my colleagues about whether we like this, whether we want to continue with it, accept it. Any,
Traditionally, voting results are very close. I think in the last several elections, they've been within 2 or 3 votes for the top vote getters. With the exception over the years, they have been traditionally. It just seems that introducing the opportunity for any losing candidate to challenge an election, I mean, it seems fair, but definitely something that we need to have a little more time to think
yeah,
about. I'm not
and
gonna-
typically, if it's a close election, they run the things through the machines again. As you said, you've done it in the past, you recount again.
Can I
Automatically.
make a parliamentary inquiry here, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And number one, did we just introduce it? Did we
No.
just? Okay,
We-
so,
we-
so,
we haven't introduced it yet. We will introduce it presumably at the end of today or some other time.
okay, I'm just, in terms of going now through this document line by line, wouldn't it make more sense? And this is how we've done it in the past, so we can change this, but once the election plan was introduced through all the moaning and groaning, it was introduced. Thank goodness it was introduced. And then we went through the process in those 30 days to look into the tweaking and the editing and the changing. And then at the public hearing and or the day we would meet again to pass it, we would make those tweaks before passage. I just don't know if we need to do this right now, what we're doing right now. Just my question.
What did you say?
I think that seems reasonable to do it later, but at the same time, if Arthur would just make us aware of those issues that he finds most concerning. It
Okay.
will be time to think about them
Okay,
thoroughly.
that's fine. I just didn't know if we're going line by line now. So if there's some 30,000 foot flags that we want to note for future, deeper dive, that's great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
3 sections.
Yeah.
I actually have a question for Ron about the recounts. That's one of those areas where people asked us, well, if we don't have a recount provision for VMA, does the state recount provision apply?
Yeah, the state recount provision would not apply, so you would need a local rule if you wanted to have such a rule.
And if
The
we didn't
state
have
rule is 5%. If the winner, the number of votes for office is greater than 5%, then you can have a recount at the state level.
Yeah, we wanted to make it simpler. We didn't want anybody questioning, our math. Just if it's within 10 votes, you could do a recount.
Okay. Okay, other areas of concern to me. Referendum was not in the previous plan and has been introduced into this.
Where is
one.
that?
What page, Arthur?
This is the very
Number
next-
11.
Number 11, following number 10, the last one. Section 3, item 11.
And the committee's issue there, the concern again from residents was, can we do referendums? The answer is obviously yes, because we've done them in the past. But if there's no VMA provision for it in the regulations here, what's the rule? And the state referendum regs are a little bit complicated. We decided make it simple and do our own VMA version here that just was very simple, direct, and workable. So Ron, again, same question for me is, if we don't have a referendum provision specified in our doc, does the state referendum rule apply?
No, the state rule does not apply to municipal elections, and I think this is probably an issue that you can have rules if you want, but if you don't have rules, I think it would always be within your power to add a question to the ballot. I don't think you need an express authorization.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
our concern was to have a simple process that was very clear of how one would add a
I'm
referendum
just,
question.
Marty, I'm just noting areas that I saw.
And
that
I
came
appreciate it. Proceed.
different. Okay, another one is on section 4. Down towards the last of that section, just before section 5. Putting a limit, non-resident property owners may submit signed forms of declaration for a maximum of 7 years. Makes sense, but it is an addition and change from the past procedure.
Yeah, we had a question about that too. I'm really glad you raised that, Arthur, because the new definition of qualified voters and residents says that defines residents in part by saying the place to which somebody intends to return after a temporary absence. And of course, we're trying to make this very operational and very clear. You know, what are the mechanics here? What does the team need to do? And so how long is temporary? And initially the committee had said 5 years, but then one of our committee members, Jen, is at the State Department, and she said that she sometimes has 2-3-year back-to-back State Department assignments. So the committee listened to that, responding to a resident input. And I understand, Arthur, a couple people probably called you about that issue too. So we thought, okay, if somebody's got 2-3-year things, they're gone for 6 years, we'll make it 7. So that's where 7 came from. And we actually do need a council decision on whether that should be 5 years or 7 years. I mean, we recommend 7.
Or not at all.
Well, if you don't put it in there at all, then what is a temporary residence? The
Well,
committee
that's
doesn't know.
that is a question. Okay.
So we need to have you define temporary here, and our recommendation is 7 years. But that's entirely up to the council.
And here is section Roman numeral 10, the first paragraph. It has been added, and I think this is an important one. The village manager issues and administers the contract at the direction of the committee. The election committee manages the election process. The mail vote service contractor reports to the committee. The committee shall keep the village manager fully informed. This is a question of division, division of what's the name?
Division of duties.
Of duties. And it also comes up on the first page at the end of section 2. The committee manages and directs the coordination of the election process with the election service contractor. So this question of division of duties, does it work? Can it work? Would it work? Should it work this way? Is a question to be considered and discussed. I know
I would, yeah.
the reason for it, it keeps a squeaky clean division between management and the committee.
It also protects the staff from getting entangled in any kind of conflict of interest or election controversy.
Right.
I think it protects fair elections, but it also really protects the staff. And our staff, Michael and Aaron, you guys are terrific. You have so much on your plate. The last thing that we think, just in terms of practicality, is for you to have yourself in the middle of an election process. So there's several reasons. One is a matter of principle, that you want to have a clean, bright line so that it doesn't look like the council is telling the staff to interfere with the election, because we do not want you to be subjected to that. We want to keep the staff protected from any such allegation. And the way to do that is with the bright line, the firewall, they call it.
Right.
The other thing is just you don't have time to do it. I mean, you got too much else to do. It really is the proper job of the committee. Go ahead.
Okay, we will discuss later, but the question is whether a bright firewall, bright line is feasible and possible.
We had one for many, many decades, Arthur. Frank Carell, me, Bob Freeman before them. Yeah, I mean, it was really a clear line, and we need to get back to that.
When were you and Frank Carell doing this?
Frank Carell and I did the election chairs for most of the previous 15 years prior to 2020.
Which 15 years?
Frank Carell was chair of the election committee for like 8 or 9 years before me. And then it was Leanne Anderson for 1 year, and then it was me for 4 years. And, during that whole time, there was absolutely no question that the staff would be involved in the election management at all. There was, in fact, I think you remember, Arthur, there was a big flap 1 year because somebody on the staff tried to help Frank Carell deliver an absentee ballot and actually had access to a single absentee ballot. And people went up to a big uproar. Oh, you can't have the staff touching an absentee ballot. That's how clear that line was. I felt sorry for the staffer who was just trying to be helpful, but it was just such a clear line for so many years. I mean, that was certainly what I have seen here.
Okay. Okay, moving on. There was one point in the appendix A voter roll verification procedure. Third paragraph at the bottom of the page says the village staff members are employees of the council. I thought we had gone over that they are employees of the village. The council does hire them and fires them, but the council is not, they're not employees of the council.
Well,
So
I talked to one of my friends who's a labor lawyer about that, and she said, are they at-will employees?
yes.
And the answer is yes, they are. And says her take on it, and again, this is an independent, somebody not necessarily doing elections, but just labor law, is that if someone is an at-will employee, the person that they report to does in fact have considerable control over their behavior. And they can be fired if they refuse even a questionable directive. At will is at will. She said, that's what makes the staff vulnerable here. I explained the election sort of, division of labor here. And she said, oh my goodness, if you've got at-will village employees, you do not want them involved in the election because they're at-will employees, they're vulnerable. So that's the take on that. And I hope that's a helpful thing because yes, of course, they are village employees, but they report to the council members and they are pretty much at the direction of the council members because you all assign their duties and evaluate their work. So there is a real issue here. It is something that I'm glad you highlighted that to
We
focus
want to
on.
be squeaky clean and correct here.
We do.
Okay.
We want to do it right. If you're going to do it as a regulation and an ordinance, let's do it right. I mean, really appreciate you taking a good look
Okay.
at this.
I have a number of smaller kind of typographical editing things, but these are the major points that I had outlined. Anybody else?
Mine is more procedural, and I think, Andrew, it may get to perhaps some of the things that you had been sharing or suggesting is, I think just real basics, and maybe, I apologize if I missed it, but I would really love to see a red line document, of all the changes, just so that.
I have it tomorrow. I promise tomorrow.
It would be impossible. I
We
think,
can
with that.
easily see the changes, because again, as Arthur had mentioned, and I say this with all great deference to all the work that the committee did, I think the understanding was we would just see some changes in dates. So this is an awful lot of good, robust additional information, but I just would like to see that reference baseline document and those red lines, and then we could more effectively go through it. And then the other piece, which is more also procedural, we talked about this difference between ordinance and regulation and policy. If this is now what we call considered a regulation, I think it'd be important to have Ron's eyes on this, because is there anything in here that crosses some line that, as you pointed out, there are some things that are in here that may be that are in discordance with either the current ordinances or the charter. So we really have to have that diligence, and then the basic red line and clean. And then I think I'll be in a much better position when it comes to January to really go through that.
I will agree with Marty on this, that a red line is so red line. This is a combination, a melding of different documents with some other things thrown in. So it would be a real challenge to try to compare this to the past.
I would still like to see a comparison, and I'd really love to see a summary of the provisions that were added. That could probably just be a pull-out summary of changes to the document.
And let me-
It's easy to do that, Susan, and happy to provide it.
Thank you.
Sounds like, and I was gonna say, I mean, if there's whole sections added, obviously just indicate that. And if there are places melded, and then if there are places where it was really just some minor edits to existing, then that, but you get
Okay,
it.
if you can provide that, that would be fine. That would be good. And as Susan suggests, a list of changes of more than word changes.
Yes, absolutely. Because we did take a look at, we put all the pieces together, we organized them into a logical sequence where they made sense. And Then we looked at, what's missing, what are people asking for? And again, that's where the recounts of the referendum provisions came in. We thought, okay, we can adopt simple ones of those, fill in the blanks, so to speak. But yes, it's only a couple places where there's anything actually new. And even then, you could argue that the recount and referendum provisions are not new. We had them in the past. They just weren't spelled out anywhere. And if you're going to have a good, thorough document, you should say what they are. So it was about clarity here. We really wanted to make this process transparent.
Moving forward.
It does appear to me that Appendix B, election forum procedure in our packet, page 79, provides new rules, quite explicit and perhaps, dare I say, advantaging incumbents with the format that you have, that you all have proposed.
Explain that, Susan. How does it advantage incumbents, please?
It's really very detailed, but asking live questions, I can say from experience in 2020, when all of the questions went to you as chair, and actually, I don't think any other committee members other than Haley, even who was acting as the moderator, even saw them until 3 or 4 hours prior to the forum. There were questions designed to disadvantage incumbents. Very
I would
clearly.
have to disagree with that assessment. That's your personal opinion, Susan.
Well, I have the questions and I don't really want to get into it, but it also could present very detailed questions for example, Jeff is treasurer. If someone were to get into the weeds in our budget, it's great that Jeff will know, but it isn't necessarily a qualification that someone would really need to be able to debate with a live question in a forum. So maybe we don't really need to have this live question.
Let me respond to that. I'm glad to respond to that, Susan. If you look up at the top of the election forum procedure, it says that the forum shall be strictly impartial. There are strict requirements in sentence number 2, must cover a broad range of issues with questions applicable to all candidates. That is precisely in there to address your point that there can't be favoritism in terms of questions targeted to just one person. And all candidates must have equal time to present their views. This is all about fairness, and that forum is so important. I mean, we've had more than 100 people attend forums, and residents have told us over the years, I'm sure you've heard the same, that the forum is one of the main ways that they make their decision about who to vote for. So one of the reasons we wanted to include the forum procedure in here very specifically in writing was to, make it clear that this is not something that is at the whim of the committee, that there are regulations on how you do a forum to make sure it's fair. And boy, I tell you, I think this is really an important part of the whole document.
Okay,
So
great. We're not debating it at this point. I
Okay,
just wanted to point it out.
Okay, moving forward.
Yes.
What procedures for moving forward? Do we send in, everyone make their own editorial suggestions? Send it in for the next meeting when we get together and we go through them one by one? Or how would we like to proceed? Any other
Arthur, may I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Just ever being the practical person here, we've got our next committee meeting on the 18th, which is coming right up. And we'll probably have another one before the January council meeting. The most efficient way to do this would be to actually have everyone in the council give us your markup, or where you have a question, let us respond, because we can certainly give you comments back up to the 18th, do it on the 19th. And in the meantime, I think the first step is that we'll give you the red line, although it's not very helpful because we combined 5 things. But we'll give it to you. Happy to do that. And I'll give you the list that Susan wanted, which is the things that we as a committee, looking at this with very careful scrutiny, thought were missing and should be in here just to be complete. So happy to do that. That's not a very long list.
So
Otherwise, it's the 23 regs just rearranged.
So Marty, let me interject, and again, I just want to put it out there, is something, it doesn't matter to me if it's red line or at least something that really highlights and points out what has changed.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
some date changes, but just what substantially has been added that is new this year than from last, and that will be extremely helpful and illustrative.
And
Okay.
they also reshuffled
Yeah.
parts too.
Okay,
to
Andrew, does that
streamline
sound good?
what's-
We all send our edits to the election committee, and then we will review their mashup of that at the next.
We didn't
meeting.
do a mashup, Arthur. Be fair. We were very
Mashup.
logical and organized.
And is that turnaround needs to be by the 18th?
No, sooner would be helpful to the committee, but get it to us as soon as you can. I mean, we have a committee meeting on the 18th, so we can go through whatever we have at that point. In the
Right.
meantime, tomorrow I'll put together the little list of the new pieces, but
Right.
that's not a long list. So, and I'll give you the red line.
Okay, so I mean, it essentially gives us this weekend.
Yeah, the 18th is coming up pretty soon, and then of course you got the holidays. So, but we'll be around over the holidays. So if you need to get a hold of us anytime,
But
don't
we-
hesitate.
We will get a consolidated, edited, modified version from you for our next council, before the next council meeting.
Well before the next council meeting, well before, and if you want to have a discussion just on this, we're available. Because we really care about good elections. The committee's message to me was do it right. Let's be thorough, let's be thoughtful, let's be careful, let's do it right. And that's what we want to give you.
We agree on that.
A matter of order.
Absolutely.
And the next move is to introduce this.
Yeah.
How you go
Yes.
and redline in and edit it amongst yourselves is a later conversation. The first thing is to introduce what we have.
Okay.
That way that starts the 30-day clock.
Okay. Okay, but in the procedures of how we are going to review, modify, edit, that is acceptable. And then at the next meeting, we will have the product of that, and we will review that again to see whether as is or make further editing to it. Okay, I'm seeing nodding of heads here. Nodding of heads.
It seems
Andrew,
like a
I
lot
can't
to
see
review.
is your head nodding?
Thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up from Andrew. Okay, so we will proceed in that manner. All the council members will send in their edits to the election committee. It will be consolidated. We will have the opportunity to review a consolidated, edited version at the next meeting.
Arthur, I just want to say,
go
I'm
ahead.
gonna look at it once we get something from the committee that gives us
Okay.
a little bit of what are the big ticket things that have changed that
Right.
we need to take a little to really focus on it.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, so we will now move to
Introduce.
introduce the VMA election regulation for 2024. I will move to introduce.
I'll second.
We have a second here. We have a vote for, okay?
Andrew's hands up.
Yes.
Andrew hands it up, good. Okay, it has been introduced. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, committee. I do want to commend-
Before you go, we also asked you if you could approve the election schedule, the one pager that we gave you. Because
Right.
that lets us get things started to move in
Page 66.
Page 66.
Right, I have no,
66 in your.
good, I have it right here. I've got it.
we'd like a vote to approve that because the dates are no longer in the main document. They're now in this one pager, which I think is much more efficient.
I'll make a motion to
Okay,
approve the schedule for the 2024 VMA election.
good. Any second? I'll second it. Aye. Okay, good. Okay, your election schedule has been introduced.
Thanks very much, you all. Looking forward to working with you to really get this perfect.
Good, thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone. Thanks, guys.
next is Jeffrey Blander, the ordinance development process.
How timely. I will make this relatively short, but it is an important topic. So why don't I cut to the chase in terms of what I was hoping as an outcome, and then I'll go through a little bit of the context and background. As an outcome from this discussion was the idea that we would, in some ways, almost what we just talked about with the election policy regulation ordinance, is what sort of ultimately action or product could we produce as a council that we would feel comfortable with? And again, is it a policy, a regulation, or ultimately an ordinance such as Somerset that outlines how legislation is initially conceived and introduced. And I am not asking for us to make that decision tonight, but ultimately for us to consider how do we improve the process that we have and what is the best form function for that. So I was hoping that I'll go through a little bit of context. I gave some materials that also our residents have that we'll have a little bit of a discussion tonight, but keep it relatively short, knowing there's some information there. And then I would expect perhaps in January, we could have this as a topic for further discussion. And then ultimately, if we feel comfortable, then we can make some decision as a council, take a vote. Again, policy, regulation, code, whatever it might be, but just to give us a little bit more specificity so that we have, and our residents have a sort of an understanding of exactly how this process works when we develop new legislation. So a couple sound bites, and again, I appreciate Arthur and the council in terms of allowing me to speak for a few minutes on the agenda. I'm going to take us back a couple bullets here. So back when I was first brought on to the council, elected my first time in spring of 2020, as we know, we had, and this is as COVID was starting to ramp up, we had two ordinances that were on the books that took up most of the first year that I was on the council. They were the sign ordinance and the first introduction of the expansion of the jurisdiction of the ethics committee. And as a part of that process, there was a really strong interest by our residents in calling for more dialogue and transparency specific to the background, research, and explanation of how the council goes about its development of ordinances. And most importantly, the community involvement up front. So what, again, was the background? Did we research other things that are happening in other jurisdictions? And this was, again, a point that had really riled up, and we had really significant outpouring of residents around this. In fact, so much so, and we'll see here in the, let me refer to the, I apologize. Here it is.
81.
81. So we have some exhibits, the ordinance process discussion. There are 3 exhibits. The first, and again, I want to just say thank you to Ron. I mean, Ron was very involved in this and had given us a really wonderful background information in terms of process and sort of a draft policy in terms of requiring explanation of proposed ordinances. I won't go through all the minutia, but again, here is what we have that Ron had shared regarding, you know, the charter section 502, just around how we discuss an issue typically. And then, and the idea is that this would be in an agenda. We'd probably have a meeting to discuss it. And then during that meeting, there'd be some motion to then perhaps direct the attorney or counsel to prepare a draft. And then it goes through, you know, we have a subsequent meeting, maybe we go through a draft. There are some tweaks, and we'll get to what at the time council member Alexander had introduced, but also the idea that this is where the community would be involved, and also perhaps some background research of what other jurisdictions are doing. And that then led to, and again, I really commend Arthur on this, where he then proposed, and I think it's a really great straightforward paragraph here that was done in February of 2021. And I'll read a part of it, but proposed ordinance shall be accompanied by an explanation of need, arguments against, alternatives, and then it should be updated, relevant additional arguments, information, research, so on and so forth, including the nearby municipalities. And there's great minutes Arthur had pointed out where we had some discussion as a council, thoughtful about, you know, should we add a little bit of a timeline to this? And, you know, do you have pros and cons? You know, what are the standards? But again, really succinct, and I think brought us very close to, I think, what would be acceptable and where our residents would feel very comfortable that there's a methodical process of discussion, first in open meeting, and then there'd be some work through of what that would mean in terms of how it would then get to a point where we would draft an ordinance and have it introduced. And then finally, and I want to thank Ron, he shared the town of Somerset that, and Ron, you could add in if you'd like, but, you know, basically had shared where the town of Somerset, and I believe this is their code. So this is actually in their code of how they go about, introducing new legislation. So I put this in here for all members of the council to consider. We have I think 3 really important documents and thought processes, anywhere from what Arthur had shared to where Ron had also shared some thoughts on best practice, and then what the town of Somerset has done. And I really believe that we have gotten to a point now that we should look at this as a council and consider, again, where do we want to go? You know, how much is too much, but what is enough in terms of giving us a process that residents can feel very comfortable with and also refer to, so that there's really no mystery involved. And just a couple other thoughts of why it's so important, you know, having this deliberate process is, as we know, and I say this with great respect, I mean, we know that we've had, just in this new council, we've seen variation. And God bless you. And, you know, so again, and this is all just putting on the table. So Arthur has shared in a very positive way that he felt that, you know, he had changed his mind on ethics, and that had led then to a change in an agenda the day before the open meeting, where then it was about introducing this. And then of late, we even have something on the agenda today, which again, I put all kudos in terms of our manager, that based upon open discussion, had reached out to our attorney and started drafting a draft of the possibility for introducing some changes to our building code. And so I'm sharing these as examples in that everyone here is doing things in the best way and in good faith. But I really believe that we need to have some standard process that residents can refer to, so that we're not necessarily seen as a council member or an individual goes off and starts and is able to change the agenda in a way without first stepping back and saying, did we have a discussion? Did the council come around this issue? Did we vote on the idea of actually having our attorney draft up some proposed legislation? Did we even look at some background research that would inform that legislation? So those are some of the things that I really would like us to consider. And like I said, this is not for today to make any decisions. It's to look at this information. Hopefully, like I said, we can have this in January as another discussion item. What I would like to see within this council, within this fiscal year, that we make some decisions, that we either put this as, again, a policy, a regulation, or even think about where Somerset is, where they codified it. And I just feel that this would be a really great step forward and give everyone confidence and a sigh of relief, just so that they know what this process is going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I looked at the Somerset protocol. It's called Protocol for Amendment of the Town Code. Essentially, it doesn't say anything. It says the mayor or a council member may present for discussion an issue requiring potential amendment of the town code. It can be presented by either advanced placement on the agenda, or the mayor's suggestion to the council at a meeting, or a council member's motion made at a meeting and approved by majority vote of the council. So anyone at any time can make a proposal for an amendment. It doesn't really place restrictions, procedures, structure, as far as I can see, on the process at all.
And so, Arthur, it's a good point that you mentioned this. So I am not saying that this
This
particular
should be the model.
is the
the-
exact model. I mean, there are
Okay.
some things in here that I think are interesting to emulate, but it was more of just putting out the
That they
concept
have done. so.
that there are other jurisdictions
Right.
that have codified this. I am not saying that
Okay.
this is what is best for us.
Okay.
By a long shot.
Good,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I wanna
Okay.
be very clear.
Thank you, Jed. Moving on. Possible building code revision. I had introduced last month the idea that we might want to revise our building code to have, essentially smaller structures, less permeable surfaces. The water committee is finding that one of the major issues is the increase of impermeable surfaces. I was advised by my colleagues on the council that we needed some professional help doing this. Michael has looked into seeking professional help, and he has found possible sources. You might want to report on what you found.
Yeah, well, the same companies that work for, or that I'm looking at to design the Brookville sidewalk would be the same types of firms, and some of them we've worked with before, including Clark Azar, on the Taylor Street study. So any of those firms we could reach out to. Obviously, developing that scope of work would be the next step if this council wants to really take on a holistic review of the building code,
I don't want to do holistic.
or wants to
focus.
focus and pick,
Yeah.
what exactly that job description will look like is the next step. But
Okay,
there's definitely firms that would be willing and able to do that.
can we direct Michael to seek that from these contractors? Okay, I see a nodding of heads.
Yeah, so we can-
Right, let's move
Since
forward
it's-
on that.
But
What?
should
Go
we
ahead.
vote since it requires it? Well, I
What?
guess you'll just look, and once you find someone, we'll need to vote.
I guess I would
To
have to,
authorize.
I guess you would be authorizing me to draft a scope of work for that project.
Yeah, but after just perhaps preliminary discussions with us. Good. Okay, so go do it.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Building code amendment restricting bioretention planter boxes. I produced a explanation for why we might want this. Essentially because we ran into serious ambiguities in the building code when we were considering the building application 2 months ago. And this would clear up those ambiguities. So Ron drafted this. I would move to introduce this amendment at this time.
I'll second.
We have a second. We have a vote to introduce for consideration. The next meeting will be 30 days from now.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, vote to introduce. We have 3 vote to introduce. Sitting on hands, questions.
So my quick
consideration?
comment is, first of all, I think
Andrew.
that this is, Andrew, I think Andrew was saying in the affirmative. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So my only comment on this, and again, it just comes to the last discussion, and I know that we've had an awful lot of dialogue, how important this is, and so the process by which we have this in front of us this was initiated, and again, going forward, there wasn't a council discussion about initiating this draft. This was a unilateral sort of effort. And I feel that when things like this are done, where drafts, and we reach out to our attorney to do this, there should be transparency to the entire council. If there is an outreach to our attorney that says, I want to draft this, I don't know, I don't understand why everyone on the council is not part of that communication, and that's.
So they were missing a step.
There's a step here, and frankly, and I say this is knowing how urgent this is. So this is not about being a bureaucrat and saying, oh, we need to delay things. It's the only other step that would have been involved in this was the idea of we have a discussion like today at this council meeting that would have said, I really feel that we need to create the ordinance, and that we would like to take a vote to work with our attorney. We're going to ask our manager to do it and develop a draft. And that is why I am abstaining from this vote. I'm not saying that I am not going to vote for it in terms of adoption eventually, but I feel that we've really missed a step here, that there should have been at least full transparency of when we reached out. And I'll stop here very, very briefly, but it does get to the point for consideration around policy, which is, all council members at the moment are not created equal in terms of the outreach to the attorney. And I believe there is a cost-cutting measure that is somewhere. I don't know if it's written or if it's word of mouth, but it says that the manager and our chair can start the clock. But I don't believe, and Susan and Andrew could add and
majority
on,
of
I don't believe that this was about the idea that there is a difference and inequity in information. So just because it's a starting of a clock, it doesn't mean that there's a unilateral outreach to say that we're going to draft something and we don't involve other council members as part of that. So again, it's a procedural thing. And that's why I'm abstaining, because I just feel that I'm a little bit out of a loss how, as a council member, I did not see any communication to the attorney that said, please draft this. And why, as a council member, I'm first seeing this after all these discussions with the attorney set this in motion. I feel for an ordinance process, we should have a discussion, or at least we should be engaged as a council that allows us to be part of that process. Because if not, I'm concerned, again, this is something that we'll all rally around. This is all important. But I just feel what comes next, and we really have to get our ducks in a row about what this process is. How do we engage our attorney? How do we set the agenda? And what and how do we share information that allows all council members to be involved and not just one or a few? That direct policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, can I just chime in real quickly? I 100% agree with Jeff on the procedural front that in this case, I agree with what Arthur's presenting, and I'm going to vote in favor. But you know, what if the next time it's something that I totally disagree with, and I'm as I am here, maybe I didn't read all my emails, surprised by this. So I think we need to have something in place that makes this a little more transparent. I do agree with the existing policy that we should go through a chair, through the chair to get legal guidance, because as it is, we have residents complaining how much we're spending on our council SEL, and it's some of those residents often that ask questions where we have to seek legal guidance. But I think that needs to be can't be loosey-goosey and everyone has a pet project or idea and the clock starts ticking for Ron in 6-minute increments. But in general, I just want to say I agree with Jeff that it would be helpful for email heads up that and or a discussion that this is something that the chair is seeking guidance on and is planning on introducing at the next council meeting. Thank you.
But that too,
But
yeah.
just to clarify, wasn't that discussed at the last meeting?
Yeah,
Wasn't it very?
It came out,
I'm looking at the minutes from the last meeting. Arthur Alexander noted we prepared a draft to amend the building code to restrict structures like bioretention planter boxes in the side yard setbacks. Arthur said it will be on the agenda for the December meeting. So I'm not clear on where.
well,
the
it came
concerns
up
are.
and then it was delayed.
Yeah, and if I could just note that this ordinance originated from staff initiative. At the variance hearing, it seemed clear that the council was keen on amending the code promptly to address this issue. So Michael, Doug, and I got together and came up with a proposal for the council's consideration. This was not something that an individual council member initiated.
And I want to be very clear, this is not finger pointing. This is not saying anyone has done anything that is malicious or malintent. It says, I think Andrew is sharing is just, I just feel that let's just look at this and say how procedurally we could just tweak a bit. So again, I just do feel a little bit out of the loop. And I want to give one example, I promise I'll make it quick, is look, in the current structure, as you just saw, Ron, right? Michael can go to you or Arthur could go to you and technically say, I'd like you to, draft this, because they can start the clock and do it. And they could do it right now. And again, not that this is anything wrong or bad faith, but they could do it and they didn't necessarily share that with us, right? And maybe it was just whatever it was in good faith. But if I tried to do that as a council member, as treasurer, I can't do that. Not only can I do that because I'd need a quorum, but I would either need the manager or
Yeah,
Arthur's
no, you
permission.
could, you just say, yeah, I have a question for Ron. You do-
But I couldn't,
Right.
I couldn't go and direct him without permission or quorum. So all I'm saying is, I think we need to take a look at this. And how do we get some parity when it comes to the legislative process? That's all.
Okay. Treasurer's report.
Aha. I apologize, let me just skip to there. So we already had on the audit, so I'll make this quick. Again, just all the effusive praise to Arthur and our management staff, and it's really a village, and this is really reporting on all the incredible work that goes on a monthly basis, including with our accountants. So just opening up to page 1 in the packet, which is 94, just putting out a couple things. This is our first tranche of our income tax. So what you see here is a real significant actual increase in our net income. And that's where you see, for example, in our net change of position from the previous month, over 250,000 or $250,000. And a lot of this is based upon this tranche. So again, this is good, but if you look at it in historical terms, I think we're actually a little bit lower than where we've been. So just putting in perspective.
Lower than last year.
But, you know, there's really nothing that's out of the ordinary here. And then, I'm sorry, the tranche that we actually received was over $350,000. And then finally, just making a note, the capital projects using some of our reserves are actually kicking in. So we had some expenses that are just the beginning of the tip of those bigger projects, widening of Quincy and some of the walkability. And with all that said, we're going to follow up, as you just talked about earlier, with our auditor and accountant on some of the ARPA and other things. So unless there's any questions, we're great standing, good fiscal health, it's all good.
Good, thank you. Our accountant says it, our auditor says it, our treasurer says it. So thank you. We are now up to community resident comments. We have anybody sitting around?
Well, Larry had his hand up.
Yep.
Larry, are you there? Or is that an old hand?
Yeah. A couple of comments. One is on, there was some, I know, I understand everybody's going to solidify their questions or concerns about the proposed election regulations, but just comment on it. The thing about number of committee members, I mean, we've had many years where we've had to get temporary new committee members. So the idea that, you know, 3 is adequate hasn't proven to be true. The other situation is that that's caused problems with that is that this is also during a time of a lot of vacations and other situations where you don't have all your members there. And if the committee's just 3 members, it in essence cannot function. Which was time and again, it came back that 5 was the minimum that would work. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Larry, this was just a question of the wording of this.
I understand. I'm just asking you to consider this in your comments that you're going to give to the election committee.
Good, thank you.
And I will say,
Okay.
I do agree with Larry on the committee size of 5 members makes a huge difference just because of the workload.
Right,
And
yeah, I
it's
agree.
it's working
So,
very well in the current.
I think
balance.
what it should say is that the committee should have 5 or more people, not.
Yeah.
The shall makes it sound like it is a law.
So well, I think Marty's trying to say that the minimum should be 5.
Okay.
But in any case, the thing about this thing about putting in was it the referendum question about whether we needed to do something to clarify that? Well, you know, that's been an obstacle for years. Back when I was on the council, there were issues where many of us felt, you know, this really should be a referendum that we find out what the village itself feels about. but there was no structure to understand how a referendum could be introduced. And understand that you guys, so many of you here, have been involved with election issues for so many years. You get it. But how would you like to have 3 newly elected, naive members to the council and new members on the election committee trying to figure out something where we haven't provided them with the regulations or insight they need? And that's the purpose of doing this. So if you're gonna, explain all these things about how a person can be accepted to run, why can't you give a good, reasonable explanation of how a referendum should be developed and presented? If it's part of what the election committee has to deal with, right now, they have no guidance on anything about how that should be done. And we know referendums are a reality. As Marty said, the village became incorporated on a referendum. So there's that. Page 82, if I could go back to that. Which one is that's something that you were talking about, Jeff? Where the hell is it?
The ordinance process.
Yeah, so the comment was that the title of that little thing that you gave said draft policy for to require an explanation of proposed ordinances. I see, Jeff, some of the things that you brought up historically. Maybe the word explanation isn't quite as illuminating of the necessity. The real necessity was, many people said, what's the need? They did not understand. All of a sudden, a person and the council decides, or the council decides to generate something. And look how that first line goes. It says the council discusses an issue and then directs the council to prepare a draft ordinance. Wow. Wouldn't it be better to first off see whether there's any need for this, a discussion of why it's coming about, and who wants to, does the village really want to get involved with this? Remember the side ordinance and how some of the issues there were unbelievable?
And Larry, can you hear me real quick? I'm not here to interrupt. I just want to interject. I just want to point out that these were just exhibits. So if you actually see, and I didn't change anything, those were just, so that document was something Ron had shared around some best practice and policy frameworks. And then Arthur actually then, in what he introduced in February, added that we should have an explanation of need. So this was just, again, some references so that as a council, we could look at all of this and say, what is it that we would like to have within VMA that meets that minimum, I don't like to use minimum, but that standard that we feel really is what residents would like. And I think that need or explanation is very loud and clear of what we've heard.
Thank you. But what I'm trying to say to you is that I think this illustration 82 here is showing that you're 2/3 of the way in, and the first third is missing. And the first third is that first thing should be a discussion of whether there needs to be anything at all. There should not be an opportunity to direct a council to spend the money on a council preparing a draft when you haven't put out enough information to have people contribute to it and give you enough things to even want to go that step. That's my point. This is another example of where people feel like they're isolated from the village council, because it says nothing about how you would first bring this up and let others come in and make a comment on it. And if some people say, well, it's on the agenda, which I'm sure they will. Okay, well, sometimes you can't see the agenda because it hasn't been put up in time, which has happened many years in the past. Today's agenda, if you click on it, you won't see it because it's not there. the agenda is actually under the packet. But if I wanted 2 days ago to look at the agenda, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So saying, well, it's on the agenda, so you had warning, is not exactly great. It would be wonderful if something like that could go out in the village email. What is that weekend wrap-up thing? You know, the council is maybe thinking about discussing hornwaggles next time. Something that would allow other people to know what's going on before we get into starting to take these actions. Enough said.
Okay, thank you,
for
Larry.
listening.
Well received. And my quick response, and again, I know it's late and everyone is peeling off, but I think even Ron has shared and there is no real definition of this, but it's around reasonableness in forming. And so again, that might be something for us to consider is what if we are talking about an introduction of legislation, do we want to think about what is then the reasonable time frame? Should it be a week or should it be 5 business days or should it be 3 business days? But again, just something that is out there so that we can all reference and understand what is that reasonable notification. Over.
Yes. Okay, anybody else have their hands up? No?
No hands up.
I am told that there are no other hands up, no other residents wanting to be heard.
Oh, wait, no, I don't.
No?
see it, no.
That brings us to the end of our agenda for tonight. Do we have a motion to
Oh,
adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second to adjourn?
Jeff
A
seconded.
second to adjourn. Mr.
Andrew beat me to it.
Andrew,
So
the reindeer here on my left. All in favor of adjournment?
Right.
We have unanimous vote. Thank you.
thank you.
Good night, everyone.